At the tender age of 11, Mary was handed a gun by her mother and asked to kill her stepfather. This is not the opening line to a thriller novel, but the grim reality of Mary Elizabeth Bailey's childhood. Mary's life was marred by violence from a tender age. Raised in West Virginia by her mother, Priscilla Wires, and her stepfather, Wayne Wires, she was subjected to constant abuse. However, the unimaginable happened one fateful day in 1987. Wayne was a man with a volatile temper, a temperament that worsened with alcohol. His anger was often directed at his wife, Priscilla, and their children. On February 24, 1987, a series of unfortunate events spiraled out of control. Priscilla bore the brunt of his fury. Bruised and battered, she was repeatedly beaten and even had a knife held to her throat. Mary's grandmother wasn't spared either, suffering a blow to the head that resulted in irreversible hearing loss. Wayne didn't stop there. He threatened his infant son, filling the home with an atmosphere of terror. Mary, a mere child, watched her family crumble under the weight of Wayne's wrath. She recalls, "The baby's crying and it's scary, and he's got a knife. I'm going to watch this man murder my brother." The fear was palpable. The threat was real. Wayne's final words to Priscilla were, "I'm going to kill you," before he passed out, drunk and exhausted from his violent tirade. Priscilla, desperate and fearing for her life, did the unthinkable. She handed her 11-year-old daughter a gun, pleading with her to end the nightmare. Mary stood before her unconscious stepfather, the weight of the gun heavy in her hands. Her mother's words echoed in her ears. "If you do this, it will all be over. You're not going to go to jail. You're too young. I need you to save me." And so, with a pounding heart, young Mary stood in front of her passed-out stepfather, gun aimed at his stomach. The gunshot echoed in the silence of the room, marking the end of one nightmare and the beginning of another. The chilling ring of the gunshot was still fresh in Mary's ears when the flashing lights of police cars poured into the home. The authorities were met with a chilling scene and a story that kept changing. Initially, Priscilla claimed self-defense. She spun a tale of a drunken, abusive husband and a desperate wife with no choice but to pull the trigger. But as the police probed deeper, inconsistencies began to surface. The story shifted, and this time, it was Mary who was painted as the shooter. Mary, still a child at the tender age of 11, found herself caught in a whirlwind of confusion and betrayal. The person she had trusted, the person who had begged her to pull the trigger, was now trying to pin the murder on her. "I felt like I was drowning," she would later recount. "My mother, who I just killed for, Nisted, was trying to sacrifice me to save herself." The case that followed was a media frenzy. The courtroom was filled with hushed whispers and shocked gasps as the details of the case unfurled. The prosecution argued that although Wayne had been a consistent source of abuse, he was unconscious at the time of his death and posed no immediate threat. The defense, however, painted a picture of a terrified child and a mother desperate to protect her family. The jury deliberated, the scales of justice teetering. In the end, Priscilla's attempt to use her daughter as a scapegoat didn't work out as she'd planned. Both were charged with murder. The echoes of the gavel striking down still ring in Mary's ears, a stark reminder of a childhood lost and a life forever altered. Priscilla's betrayal was a bitter pill to swallow, but it was this very betrayal that marked the beginning of Mary's journey to reclaim her life. Mary's charges were dropped, but her life was forever altered. This child, thrust into an adult's world of violence and fear, was now a ward of the state. She was placed in foster care, a sudden shift from her turbulent home to a new environment. It was a different world, but the echoes of her past followed her. The memory of her mother's desperate plea, the recoil of the rifle, the haunting image of her stepfather, all were etched deeply into her young mind. Mary, however, was not one to succumb to her circumstances. She was a fighter, a survivor. Despite the trauma she'd experienced, she held tightly onto a semblance of normalcy. She delved into her studies, pouring her energy into learning, using knowledge as an escape from the haunting shadows of her past. School became her solace, a refuge where she could be just another student, not the girl who killed her stepfather. Sports, too, became a beacon for Mary. She ran, she played, she competed. Each victory was another step away from her past, each loss a reminder that she was still standing, still fighting. Through it all, she found a sense of accomplishment, a way to prove that she was more than her history, that she was not defined by one horrific act of desperation. But Mary knew she couldn't outrun her past forever, so she faced it head-on. Therapy became a part of her daily routine, a necessary confrontation with the demons of her history. She talked, she cried, she screamed, she healed. It was a slow process, filled with pain and tears, but it was a journey she knew she had to take. And so, Mary built a new life from the ashes of her old one. She was no longer the scared little girl holding a rifle, but a strong, resilient woman who had survived the unimaginable. She had moved from being a victim to a survivor, from a pawn in her mother's desperate plan to a woman in control of her own destiny. Over the years, Mary had little to no contact with the woman who'd forced her into a nightmare. In 1998, Priscilla reached out from prison, asking Mary to testify on her behalf at a parole hearing. This was a turning point in their strained relationship. Despite everything, Mary made the tough decision to help her mother, saying, "I would like to have my mother back." This statement speaks volumes about the complexities of their relationship and the depth of Mary's forgiveness. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Mary was continuously grappling with the paradox of wanting to move forward while being tethered to a past that was nothing short of a nightmare. She was helping her mother, the very person who pushed her into a dark corner of life at such a tender age. This was an ongoing struggle for Mary, a testament to her incredible resilience and her pursuit of closure. Mary tried to help her mother adjust to life on the outside, but the shadows of the past were never far behind.